Luminous morning, ladies and gentlemen, eminent guests, professors, and research scholars. It's my delight to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's session on researching ecological vulnerability as a part of the faculty development program on contemporary literary trends and devices. We are honored to have amidst us Dr. Karthika V.K, Assistant Professor of English in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. Her teaching philosophy is deeply rooted in her belief that education must be an agent of transformation by enabling its stakeholders to activate social and emotional learning, thus building a better humanity. She gained insights into the challenges encountered by language learners and the potential remedies that resolve them, and polished her understanding of a multicultural, multilingual, and multi-ethnic learning and a teaching scenario. Her fidelity to the realm of literature is echoed in her broad specializations in aviation English, sustainability and education, post-humanism and ELT, design thinking and ELT, language learning strategies, translation studies, critical pedagogy, peace education, cultural studies, second language acquisition. She has presented more than 31 papers in national and international journals and conferences and has delivered more than 35 guest lectures. We are favored to have you, Dr. Karthika, to share her perception and proficiency with us today. We welcome you, ma'am, to illuminate us on the topic, researching ecological vulnerability. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Priyadarshini, please confirm if I am audible once again, because I couldn't hear a bit of your talk, so I just want to ensure. Can somebody please confirm?
Ma'am, am I audible now, ma'am?
Yes, you are. You are. Okay, thank you. So in case if you cannot hear me, please indicate that in the chat box or message me. I hope you have my WhatsApp number. So
Sure.
please let me know, because I don't know whether there are any technical glitches happening. There was some lag in what I could see on the screen. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'll begin. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, participants and organizers. And I'm really thankful to SRM for this opportunity, the head of the department and the coordinator, Dr. Arun Prabhu, who invited me for this program. I'm really thankful for this opportunity to discuss a bit of my research with you on vulnerability, especially with regard to ecological vulnerability. So I think I will start sharing the screen. I hope it is visible.
Yes.
And is it full screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So today I just I can hear some crosstalk. Somebody else is talking along with me, so it's a little echoing. Yeah, now I think it is fine. So yes, this talk is largely based on a few work, some of which you must be familiar with, being people trained in literature and literary and cultural studies. One is the book on eco-precarity by Professor Pramod K. Nair, and the book co-written by Numbers and Nerves, if I remember it right, authored by Scott Slovic and his father, Paul Slovic. So one second. There's a little girl who came in to say hi. Okay, so these are the two works I used as a theoretical framework for this particular chunk of my research, which is published in Scott Slovic's website called Arithmetic of Compassion. I'll share you the link to the article and to the website at the end of the talk. So I'm not looking at how vulnerability is represented in literature per se, but I'm looking at how the cultural representations of vulnerability can be researched. So this is one kind of an example that you can use if you are interested in researching the eco crisis in literature or cultural products or cultural studies, in that if you would like to put it in that paradigm. So I'll just begin. I hope the slides move. What makes us vulnerable? The fundamental question, okay? So we need to be sure about it before we go further. So we are all open to be injured, to be harmed. We are prone to this kind of injury. You know that. So it can be the physical injury, it can be the emotional or psychological kind of injury. We are vulnerable when we are prone to such, or we have human bodies and minds which can be hurt. So if you look at vulnerability in that general sense, you can see that there is a high possibility of being injured, being hurt, being harmed. Okay, because we have that biological kind of a construct which can be harmed, which can be hurt. Think about it, you do something, even the kitchen business, the women will associate it more. Unfortunately, that's how our society is formed, the stereotype. They can easily connect with having small time injuries in the kitchen, and the children who do sports, they're more prone to or more vulnerable towards being hurt when they do athletics. Think about it. So it has something to do with the kind of realm of operation that we are working in, but still beyond that, we are vulnerable to different kind of mechanisms around us. So humans, non-humans, and nature all are vulnerable. Okay, we cannot say that human bodies are alone vulnerable. No, the non-humans are also vulnerable, and the nature is also vulnerable. And I'm not looking at precisely human or non-human vulnerability as such, but I'm focusing more on the nature. um, how this eco-precarity, as Professor Nair had termed it, would operate in our day-to-day life in the Anthropocene context. This is what I am going to look at. So just understand that we are biologically constructed in such a way that we are prone to injuries. We have bodies which can be injured. We have minds which can be injured. So that makes us vulnerable to several different things. You being hurt by words. Think about the times you've been hurt by words. You're not stones. You're not inanimate thing that anything comes and goes out. We get hurt by our colleagues, by our family members, by our friends, or even strangers can hurt us. Body shaming is one example, which suddenly comes to my mind. And now think about the expressions of vulnerability. And when we think about the expressions of vulnerability, we have this interesting term, which is called precarity. So precarity is different from vulnerability because vulnerability is a kind of general concept, and precarity is when the injury actually happens. We are suffering that injury, okay? And it is not just restricted to one particular agent, but it could be social, economic, cultural conditions that are making us vulnerable, that are making us injured. So when that injury happens, we become precarious subjects. And it is a condition that stems as a result of several different, maybe political, social, policy making kind of interferences that happen in our lives. Think about it a bit. I have this university training where whenever I go to my teachers and ask a question, they say, think about it, Karthika. So it has become a part of my verbal stuff as well, that I always ask people to think about it. So please understand that we have bodies which are vulnerable, we have minds which are vulnerable, and there are several social, economic, and other factors, political factors around us which make us quite precarious. Okay, so vulnerability, when it becomes a biological conditioning, precarity is quite relational. Okay, and it generates from the vulnerable body's interaction with the socio-cultural world around us. So we are vulnerable, physically constructed to be vulnerable. And then what makes our existence precarious? That's our bodily interactions with the other, yeah, whoever you perceive as the other. So now when we discuss ecological vulnerability or eco-precarity, and eco-precarity, we are using the bigger framework of environmental humanities. So within that, we place this. So when you think about it, there are several fields like energy humanities, blue humanities, hydrofeminism. I mean, these are some of the areas that I'm interested in. So when you look at it, we have several different areas within environmental humanities itself. And I'm looking at one particular aspect, how eco-precarity is being represented through a particular cultural medium. That's the crux of my talk today. I'll share the full-length paper later on, but it's slightly different from what I have written there, or maybe a little more crispy. And when I talk about this particular framework, where I place this study or this kind of an analysis within the larger framework of environmental humanities, I'm taking some aspects from psychology. This is where I borrow certain concepts from Numbers and Nerves by Scott Slovic and their website, Arithmetic of Compassion, and the kind of ideas Professor Scott Slovic shared over various platforms. Very impressive kind of work. So, I take some concepts from psychology and then connect it with this notion of eco-precarity and try to interpret it. Interpret one particular cultural medium, which is photography in this context. So literary and cultural studies now are taking an ethical turn. Okay, so you can see the emergence of it. We don't really go back to Keats and Shelley and other romantics, and then we don't glorify that. Even Shakespeare is being read in a very different way, right? So if you the classic example of Tempest, the Tempest, if you would like to take it, we don't read it as a tragedy comedy, or we don't read it as in the traditional kind of lenses through whatever. But then we look at the concept of colonialism that is coming in, the imperial powers being worked, the Caliban being portrayed as the other, all sorts of Oriental kind of reading we bring into this notion of, this idea of the Tempest, or the text called The Tempest. So you can see that from there, that is one very basic example. But if you look at it, as I said, petrofiction, if we look at petrofiction, I think it was Amitav Ghosh who coined the term and who came up with this idea. So when you look at it, we are moving away from all these traditional romanticized concepts of dealing with literature. I don't disagree if you say that there are people who are still with Nectar in a Sieve and other kind of writing, but still there, if you look at it, it's again a different kind of human precarity which are being discussed there. How relevant it is a question, but in a sense, the humanities as a discipline is focusing more on literary studies in particular and cultural studies as well. Look at the ethical responsibility that we have as academics to talk about trauma, victimhood, and such crisis, different types of crisis. So how art or literature documents crisis, trauma, victimhood, these are the things that will come under the study of precarity or vulnerability. And then when I talk about eco-precarity, I'm again borrowing from Professor Nayar's work, the contingent nature of the earth. The earth is quite vulnerable. And how is it vulnerable? How is that vulnerability of the earth is affecting or making the human life precarious, or the already vulnerable human life precarious or injured or hurt. And now the juxtaposition. So this is achieved through the juxtaposition of the delicate and the proper with the grotesque. So that is how we evoke pity and fear. Right. So you think about the tragic hero concept, in Malayalam, we have got it like pretty much Sanskritized. We have got Hero that then Adi Pradapa Gunavan, Vikhyada Vamshan, Tharabalan, Nayagan. So that is the concept of hero, which is discussed in Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. So this is how the person has to be. So now what happens is that when you think about hero, this is how the hero should be. Yes. This is how This is how the hero should be. And then, any deviation from there is perceived as, 1 second. Thank you so much. Can you just close the door, please? And ask him not to send the kids. Yeah. So, we have a very friendly kind of atmosphere, our staffs, children are here, so they're just around. Sorry about that. So what I was trying to say is that sometimes there is clear kind of deviations. This notion of the Nayaka concept has undergone a lot of changes. And when you look at the Greek tragedy and several of the Shakespearean tragedies as well, you see that tragic flow or that kind of hamartia in all the characters, right? He is good in all ways, but then one particular flow is there in his character which is causing the downfall of this person. Do you understand that? So that's how it goes. The juxtaposition of the best with the grotesque, the most attractive one with the grotesque, the most innocent one with the bizarre one. So that is how we can evoke pity and fear. And now that is the turn that we take, in a sense, if you look at it, we have a beautiful landscape. So you think about the Facebook or other, I'm not there on other social media platforms, oldie in a sense, you can call me. So I frequent on Facebook. So if you can look at the kind of challenges that happen, it's just like before something and after something. Why do we juxtapose that? You think about the psychological kind of working before something and after something. So before something happens or before these many years, this was how it is, the photo challenge and other things. So there is always a kind of juxtaposition that happens in poetry, prose, and other cultural kind of elements, even in films. You think about, I think largely we have some population from Tamil Nadu. And if you are of my age or even older than me, you will remember this movie called Padayappa. This is a classic example of this juxtaposition bit. So one of my favorite examples for decoding stereotypes. So you have a character played by Ramya Krishnan, who is called Neelambari. And then you have a very kind of stark opposite character played by Soundarya. I forgot the role, the character's name also. But then the other one is a very modern kind of woman who is very arrogant, who is city born, and then, the kind of urbanized behavior and all. Whereas Soundarya's character is more like a pavam, meek, very benevolent, very kind, very innocent kind of a character. And the same trope you can see in Hindi cinema and in other regional language films as well. Why is that juxtaposition happening? Through kind of comparisons that they are establishing without establishing it loudly and clearly. It is getting imbibed into the spectator psyche that something is better and the other one is not so good. How do we come to that judgment? We don't see the Neelambari perspective in several aspects at all. We look at that pavam, nice, good kind of a girl whose character is played through Soundarya's, mesmerizing kind of action or whatsoever. You think about it. So now with all that, I'm going to take you to a very important photograph, very painful one. I would not hesitate to say that. And every time I look at it, it brings immense kind of pain. Though this happened before I was born. This picture is titled as Burial of an Unknown Child by Raghu Rai. Very powerful kind of a picture. Some of you might have identified this by now. This was a clip from the Bhopal gas tragedy. So if you look at it, the child is gone, and look at the hand that is placed on the forehead. The child has gone through a lot of trauma. The child is no more, and he or she is being given the kind of solace, respect, kindness, benevolence, love, affection, whatever you can term, through that touch after he or she is gone. Think about it. This is the kind of juxtaposition of the kind and compassionate with the grotesque. that I have been talking about. It's a very painful kind of picture. That same way, if you look at the Vietnam thing, there is this skinful girl coming all naked with her hands open and running towards the camera, or the Kevin Carter photography, if you look at. These are all the juxtaposition of the kind of, I mean, this picture is quite a marvelous one, because if you look at it, you can clearly see that contrast, something that the child could never get in his or her life, or maybe during the time of that struggle, um, just before he or she passed away. Nothing was given, right? It was like nature was uncompassionate, people around, perhaps, we never know. And then that is being given during the burial. Okay, so you look at it, how futile life is, how difficult it is to behold this sight. So through such contrasting kind of images in the sense, I'm not talking only about photographs, I'm talking about the literary stuff as well, the kind of words that are written. Sometimes some of the lines in the poetry will be really hooking your heart, right? It's very difficult to tolerate, difficult to put up with and all. So now you look at it, this is that juxtaposition of the contrast, and this is how we evoke greater amount of empathy, and we direct people, or we ask people, look at this, this has been the plight, and does the child deserve it? Was it that child's fault? Whose fault was that? Yeah. Why did this precarious condition occur to the child? We all have a body which is vulnerable, but look at the precarious condition, and then how can we be more compassionate? Okay. Now I'll move to a few key concepts. This was just to set the ground straight. Now we will look at the key concepts from psychology, which I'll be using to discuss this study. So look at it, psychic numbing. It was a concept, it is a concept developed by Robert Lifton. It is said that we are easily overwhelmed by numbers more than one. And there is a kind of, Scott Slovic argues that there is a tragic insensitivity towards large-scale phenomena, which is true in a sense. You hear that, you think about the COVID times. Yeah. One person is affected by COVID. I remember it started in Kerala. One person is affected by COVID, and we were like, okay, the first death we were scared, and then the second death, yes, that scare factor was still there. But then people started dying in large numbers, and somewhere we stopped caring for it. When things happen in large numbers, when tragedies happen in large numbers, when the death toll raises, it's indirectly, inversely proportional to our empathy and sympathy and all. We become quite insensitive towards such a phenomenon, because it's not just one person. There are several people. Do you get that? We actually think otherwise. We think that, okay, so many people died, we will be worried. No, not like that. It's actually one incident that triggers, and similar several incidents, it doesn't trigger us. This is a psychological phenomenon, and it's called psychic numbing. Okay, tragic insensitivity towards large scale phenomena. Please understand that. And you think about it again. You think about it. Think about your own life experiences. When did you feel more empathize with someone? When it is a single phenomena. When it happens in large groups, somewhere we just generalize it. Chalega. It just happens with several people, not just you. You think about how you confront or how you comfort these so-called comfort, these people with depression. Someone comes and complains, hey, you are not alone, there are several people. That's not how we have to talk to a person who is depressed, or who says that that person has depression. But this is what we do. We try to multiply. We try to say that there are several people existing. Okay. So that is my premise number one. And then the next concept is pseudo inefficiency. not looking at the bigger picture. Okay, so you might have heard my bio not being read out, and I work in English language teaching largely. That is my area of specialization, and cultural studies and literary studies are kind of my passion. It doesn't mean that I'm not passionate about the other one. I do significant amount of work in ELT, but for a change, at times I do write and read in cultural studies and literary studies as well. So I take several aspects of such crisis, gender issues, climate crisis, wars, such things into my ELT classrooms, English language classrooms, with my BTech students, quite switched on ones. You know, engineering students are generally very smart. And doesn't mean that the others are not, but I'm just saying it. You should not think that I'm making stereotypes in this talk. No, not at all. So there is this pseudo inefficiency that they always vocalize. So when I say that, okay, there is climate crisis, let's have a discussion on that. What is resulting in this climate change? Why do you think climate changes? And what kind of a turn we are taking now? And the students say something, we cannot do anything about it. We are just, you know, our efforts or our not taking efforts, it's not going to make any changes, ma'am. UN has to do something, or some other kind of agency has to do something. We cannot do anything about it. This is called pseudo inefficiency. I can do something, but I'm not able to do that because I think that my doing is not going to give any kind of input to the larger kind of context. So kind of inefficiency that is pseudo. It's not that I'm not efficient enough, but I perceive myself to be inefficient. And I think that my work is not going to contribute anything to the betterment of the crisis. I mean, betterment of the solution. No, I don't think so. This is what pseudo inefficiency is. Now, the prominence effect. Competing values lead to distraction and inaction. So you think about it. There could be contrasting kind of interests, and then we think about it and we place importance to one particular aspect. Okay. For example, you are going to buy a car, and there are several different cars, and you shortlist a few of them, and always you give importance to one particular feature of one of the cars. You compare, maybe it's mileage, maybe it's special color, maybe it's special make, or the portionless that it offers. Sometimes it'll be as silly as the design of the something. You know, you think about it. Or think about purchasing a particular cloth piece. You go and to a textiles, and then you have a few shortlisted, and how do you choose that particular one? It may not be the clubbing of, oh, this is good, this is good, this is good, therefore I'm taking this. There might be one particular feature that is quite attractive or that you prioritize. And then that might be the reason. In all probability, these are all psychological concepts. That might be the possible reason for you to pick that kind of product. So this kind of a prominence effect operate in our mind, and then we result. We don't do the action that we are supposed to do. We think that, okay, this is how it should be, and let it go that way. I'll explain it later with examples. Then there is this asymmetry of trust. So it's a known thing, right? We all have that. Once the trust is violated, it's very difficult to build it. So the thing is that the journalists present certain facts, the scientists present certain facts, but to believe it, it's very difficult. To erode that trust, you have some kind of concepts in your mind. To get it eroded, it's very, very easy. But then you cannot you cannot really build that trust factor. So they say that global warming is a reality and this is how it should be. Then your prominence effect is something else, you know. It tells you that, oh, it's going to happen after 50 years or 60 years. By then I'll be up somewhere. So like that, from that tiny bits of personalized kind of imagination, you just dismiss several things. So there is this greater asymmetry of trust where you cannot really build trust about facts and figures in somebody's mind, but easily can take it off. Okay, so one particular scam, you just think about all the WhatsApp messages and all that we received during the COVID times. Think about all the crazy stuff that people were doing. So how did that happen? It's very difficult to build trust based on facts, but several things that are factless or something that is like quite loose can get into the brains because we associate it, we give prominence to that. This is easy, yeah. Manjal or turmeric is easy to be taken. So yes, this cures everything. We can believe. So this prominence effect and asymmetry of trust, they operate simultaneously, and it can complicate the kind of action that one needs to take, and then freeze it. Yeah, we don't act. Even if we want to act, we stop acting. This is one thing. We will continue with the key concepts, and there is this interesting idea of anesthesia of destruction. So quantification is the anesthesia of destruction is a very interesting statement said by Vandana Shiva. No introduction is required for her, I'm sure. So what is this quantification? You know, you quantify. Okay, something happened, earthquake. How many people died? Two people died. Okay, two brothers from the same family, they died. And then you are shocked. Okay. Then you hear that the entire village is gone. Okay. Okay. You feel something. But then the numbers increase. It's like 120 people, 240 people, and thousands, 10,000s. The way the number increases, as I said, your empathy is coming down, and then there is kind of a numbing effect as related to the psychic numbing kind of concept. And what happens is that, to counter this anesthesia of destruction, to give the antidotes to it, what we have to do is to single out incidents, individual anecdotes. This is what Vandana Shiva also argues, individual stories of destruction, crisis need to be told. This is one of the arguments that I found very relevant for us people. And I can see that when I read the literature which documents crisis, I can see that there are several singular kind of narratives. One object, there is one thing about glaciers melting. So one glacier melting, and what it's a kind of personification, okay, personifying the glacier. So that ice mass, big one, that is melting, and how is it feeling, and what is a catastrophe that has to be awaited by the single thing melting. So it's a power of singularity that is being discussed there. So one single thing. And there is a beautiful story in Malayalam, which was written long ago, like in 1970s. It was written by one of the very famous writers called Tagadi Shivashankara, which was translated into English, titled In the Flood. Okay, so in that, it is the story of a dog which was isolated, which was protecting the owner's property till it was taken away by a crocodile which was just floating through the waters. The family escapes when the boat comes, and the people do not take the dog on board, and then it dies. A dog's death, right? So when you think about it, when you read through it, I wanted to read it out to you, but then time will not permit. So I thought I'll have the theoretical discussions rather than reading the story. You can browse it, it's available online, In the Flood. So the kind of empathy, if it was talking about, if the story was about several multiple different kind of dogs or other animals which were several, right? Like several cattle go lose their lives in flood. We've been seeing it. So rather than that, this particular author is focusing on one single dog. And that makes us feel so connected with it. That makes us feel so much empathy. We step into the shoes of the dog, if the dog has shoes, and then we really think about it. how would it be? What would be going through the mind of the dog and all? So writers, authors, they go for that. They go for, I mean, recently they are trying for that. There is an interesting poem by Lucifer in the Train, if I remember it right, by Adrian Cecil Rich. So Rich talks about Lucifer traveling and then Lucifer seeing all kind of destruction. So Lucifer is traveling from heaven to hell in a train, and what we see is the earth and the destructions that are happening on earth. Like it's a very interesting kind of poem, but it doesn't capture, though Lucifer is the only one who's traveling, it doesn't capture quite a lot of things. When I started reading in vulnerability and eco-precarity and these concepts of singularity and all, I started thinking how nice it would have been if the focus was on one particular phenomenon, like deforestation or some kind of or industrialization or some kind of pollution, one particular aspect being focused. That would evoke a lot more sympathy and empathy in the readers and spectators' minds. Okay. Self-erasure, translucency, and empathy. So empathy is possible when there is this me kind of an arrogance being erased, and then we become transparent, translucent. Okay, so a diminishing of self to allow empathy to work through. So it's just like, light passes through, just like that the empathy goes through. So we need to have such kind of a human mind where we are kind of vulnerable to be empathetic in a sense. Yeah. So now, the next concept is of slow violence, which was proposed by Rob Nixon in one of the very interesting studies. So, slow violence occurs gradually and you cannot see it. Pretty much it becomes invisible, or it is invisible. And this is a constant kind of violence, very constant one, that is dispersed across time and space. So spatially and temporally, it's just like quite widening kind of a thing, and you don't know when it happens, how it happens. You really don't perceive it. Violence that is typically not conceived as violence at all. You think about it. I usually tell my students to think about the relationship issues that they have. That's also slow violence, right? Toxic relationships into which we are. It works in a slow manner without we really realizing that this is violence. It goes on. Right. And then if you think about it in the eco-precarity kind of thing, you look at it. We say that global warming is a reality, but for the entire destruction, it will be another 50 years. As I said, by then I'll be gone, kind of a thing. How is this destruction happening? Now it is happening. Yesterday it was happening. The next moment it is happening. It is happening. This present continuous tense. Yeah, if I call my language teacher within me. So it's just like in continuous form, it is going on. But then we don't see it. Yeah, one building collapses, we can see that it has collapsed. But the damage that is happening to the earth, it is going on. But it is not quite we can't see it, we can't capture it with our naked eyes quite easily, because it is continual and temporally and spatially quite dispersed. Very dangerous kind of a violence, nature of a violence. Apprehension, to understand slow violence, this is the key term. Yeah. So this is a crossover term that draws together the domestic perception, emotion, and action. So a building is leaning, or it has some kind of a problem, or your car is making some kind of a noise which is not quite often heard, then you have an apprehension something is wrong with this. Or the kind of leanings, not the pizza tower that I'm talking about, the kind of leaning that you see in the elevation of a building, you see that there is something wrong in that. So we have this apprehension, this doubt, we become dubious about something. So to understand slow violence, if you're doubtful about something, yes, good enough. I have this, I was away from the 2018 flood. I was in Andhra Pradesh at that point of time. So I was not in Kerala when we had this 2018 flood. And I could only see the visuals, and I couldn't be part of shame on me, but I couldn't be a part of the rescue thing, nothing at all. I could just send money. That's it. So, as a person who was so separated from that flood experience, there was a limit to which I could empathize. There was a limit to which I could understand certain things, because it is like a second order kind of empathy, right? Because I'm not connected with that. The thing that associate me with that is that it is my place, and that kind of an association as a native of Kerala. And then generally about the human precarity, seeing pregnant women being airlifted, all sorts of painful kind of visual documentation that was reaching me uh, through YouTube channels or TV screens and all. So from there, recently, back 6 months ago, I had this opportunity of experiencing what a flood is, because I was in Kerala, in a place, and then suddenly I could see the water level in the. We used to live in a very beautiful house. We sold it off because of this continuous flood affecting it very recently. So this was the first time I experienced that beautiful sight. There is a big paddy field in front, and the typical village beauty that you can imagine, such scenic kind of a thing. But climate change, there was nothing like that 10 years before, or 12 years before. Now things have changed. I really understood or experienced what is slow violence and what is this apprehension. So that is why I'm telling you this. So one day the rain was on for several days, and I could see the water level rising. And then my husband was watching, and he could see a small kind of bridge over there, and he knew up to where he can drive the car out, and after that there is no escape. So we were watching from the terrace, we were watching, I mean, from the balcony we were watching it. And when the water reached a particular level, we drove and dropped the car in a higher level kind of a place, like somewhere up there. And then we had to walk through the water back home. It was very difficult. I could see snakes floating. I could see several things coming, several waste stuff like bottles, glass bottles, plastic bottles, several things crossing my way because the water was rushing through by then. And the water level was very low when I went compared to the level that we had when we came back. So you look at it, I had an apprehension about the water level rising and all. For the next 3 days, we were kind of like locked inside. We put everything up, took the washing machine or whatsoever, all home appliances up, and then move the kitchen upstairs. Think about the kind of adjustments that we have to make when the nature is quite precarious and the slow violence is happening. So you think about it, it's a very interesting kind of narrative to look at, and you can see such representation in literature and culture. Why do they get representation is the key question that we need to ask. This is one way where we have taken that ethical turn away from the romanticization of everything. My heart leaps out when I behold a rainbow in the sky, or Shakespeare saying, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art so lovely and so temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, but summer's leaves hath all too short a date. From there, we have moved to this kind of a very literally painful kind of documentation, where people just say things. This is how it is. There are several petrofictions which talk about the crisis, or you talk you read this very interesting book called N Makaje. It documents the kind of endosulfan generated illnesses and the crisis that people have been going through. So look at it, we are into this era of slow violence, and are we having enough apprehensions about it? And apprehension, as the Slavics say, both of them, Pole Slavic and Scott Slavic say, that is the key word to understand slow violence. And then comes this power of singularity, which I referred to in the previous slide, focusing on a singular entity to overcome this anesthesia of destruction or psychic numbing. You focus on the singular narrative, one incident, one victim, and you talk about that. Okay, the writers write about that. The little child who lost his life at the seashore. You remember that picture the moment I say Alan's picture come to your mind, right? Ian's picture come to your mind. So the child lies there. The beauty of the sea is very much there, and the child lies over there. And the contrasting kind of an image, the serenity of the waters and the child's lifeless body, that brings a lot of pain to your mind. And that is so powerful because there are not many children over there. This, we think that it was the other way around. No, but this single child, his ethnic identity, his plight, his father's plight, everything matters there. So that is the power of singularity. One incident, one event, one victim. When we are talking about that, there is more empathy being generated and there is more chances of conquering the psychic numbing that we talked about. Now, visuals are powerful documentations. You can really identify that. You know, we have all watched Drishyam, for that matter, in several different languages. So a visual is very powerful. You can get it into your memory. And I'm not talking about the visually challenged people there because my ability to discuss that is very much like limited. So when we can see, the visuals are very powerful, and visuals of mass destruction is contrasted with visuals of the individual victimhood. Right? You see several of the acid attack victims in a frame with Shah Rukh Khan. It's very different from one particular victim coming for a TED talk and talking to you. Think about it. You feel that there is a grouping that is happening in the first case and there is a celebrity standing with them. They are being taken care of, the sheroes, right? And when you are contrasting it with the usual TED talk stage, that stage where the spotlight is on the speaker and you are in the darkness, just like you are in a theater, in a cinema hall, just like that. You're sitting there and listening to this person, and the acid attack victim comes there being spotlight. Think about it. Which one is more powerful? And that becomes the power of singularity. Okay. We become more translucent. We become more empathetic. And we try to counter this psychic numbing when this singular person, the singular victim, talks about a single trauma. Rather than, I have been through this, I have been through that, I have been through this, that. You think about it. We are so tuned somewhere in our brain that we can focus on one particular thing more, and it can generate more empathy than when we are thinking about several different tragedies, right? Now, there are several literary and cultural kind of documentation, several poetry. You think about, this is my favorite example. People, my students say that, ma'am, wherever you go, you got this. Yes, the ringer roses, pocket full of posies, bush all for down, right? So you have various versions of that. The children hold their hands, go round and talk about it. I mean, sing it very happily, merrily, all it goes. But then what is it about? That is a documentation, that is a literary documentation of a tragedy that happened long back. It is the plague, the Great Plague. So the people used to, they sneeze and they die. Okay, so ringer roses. First, it appears as pink color circles on your body. The rashes appear. Okay, so that is ringer roses, and then pocket full of posies. Posies are some medication kind of plants, medicinal plants. The flowers, they keep it just to save themselves, like how our Ayurveda works, the leaves and other things. So they keep it in their pocket. So pocket full of posies. Okay, ash bush all fall down. So that is the sneezing sound that happens. You sneeze and then all fall down. Everybody falls down, which means everybody dies. You look at it, it's a tragedy being documented in literature, and all our children go round and round singing it. And then we are also very happy. Yeah, my child sings it. Very fantastic, right? So literature always documented crisis. Okay, and through time, it might have lost its colors. It might have lost its original painful kind of memories. And sometimes, our sheer ignorance of it, whatsoever works. There are cultural and literary kind of documentations through photography, poems, dramas, films, comics. There are several comics, other art and literary forms, if you think about it. So there are several films that depict such kind of painful depictions. Okay, so that is a disease memory that I recalled, and there are several other things, gender kind of vulnerability, and again, my focus is on eco precarity, so I'll bring it back to that. And now I'm going to discuss this particular text in quotes, which is an exhibition that was done by a photographer called K.R. Sunil. See a Boiling Vessel. This was done last year, presented by the RE Archives, the Ocean Archive, and it was curated by Riaz Komu in Mattancheri in Kerala. So this photo series of K.R. Sunil is called Chavittu Nadagam, Storytellers of the Seashore. Chavittu Nadagam is a kind of stamped drama. It is called. It is kind of art form which is very unique. Okay, and this art form itself is very vulnerable because there are no practitioners. It is associated with a particular community. Okay, and the fisher folk community who belong to the particular Christian community, and it has origins in the Portuguese invasion, and it is from Portugal that this drama form, this art form came into Kerala. And very few people are there who practice it, and this has become a kind of in youth festivals, school youth festivals and all, this has become an item in courts, item for performance to get points for the students to win and all. But this is the only way in which it is living now. And there are some practitioners who are commercializing it to survive, to get this art form survived. So as it is, this particular art form itself is vulnerable. And I am focusing in the article, I'm focusing on that. But in this talk, I'm not focusing on the vulnerability of the art, but the vulnerability of the artists because of the precarity of the nature in which they are rooted. So they are from this coastal village called Chelanam, which is sinking, which is going beyond, beneath the sea level now, right? The sea level is rising, and these people there are not well educated enough to theorize it and classify it as whatsoever. They just say that Bhumi irikkukayanu. Bhumi is sitting. Bhumi means the earth. The earth is sitting. This is what they are saying. And K.R. Sunil has documented these particular Chavittu Nadagam artists as a contrasting image. So next slide, you will see them. Okay, I haven't taken all the pictures. Some of the pictures that I found to be shared here, I took. You can visit his website. Probably he might have uploaded it then. There, you look at this. This person is the only one who lives in that area now. His house is the only house that is left there because others have left their property and moved to the other parts and trying to live in their relative's house or trying to live in a rented house when they have a piece of land on earth, and then they have a property there. They have to leave it and go there because the water rushes in. Doesn't matter which season it is. Whenever the tidal waves come up, whenever the tides happen, the water invariably enters the house, and contaminated water. It's just like the classic case, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Same case. So you look at the kind of the embellishment the person has got as Carlman, which is a king. So he is in that emperor kind of a costume. So are the others, very bright, glittery kind of costumes are there for these Chavatinadagam artists, for all their characters. So it's actually, if you look at the vulnerability of the person, again, like these people who are not valued in the society because of their identity as the fisher folk or the Dalit identity, if you would like to classify that way. From there, this is one way. Their art is actually empowering them to make the others watch them, respect them. So the art is so empowering for them. But at the same time, when they are these brilliant artists, look at the kind of their reality. This is the palace in which Savior lives. Think about it. This guy who is acting as an emperor goes back to this particular house. And K.R. Sunil found that rather than picturizing the house alone, contrast it with this. This is the contrast that we were talking about, you know, the tragic kind of juxtaposition of the grotesque with the compassionate. You look at it. So the compassionate arithmetic here itself is the lens that K.R. Sunil looks at it. Right. So this is another person from another shore, another part of the village. You look at it, the water enters, and that is not only in this house. Wherever the houses are, there several of them are quite dilapidated. The people are not inhabiting there. You look at the pauses they have to do, and then this is the reality where they are rooted. The color of the water, you look at it. How can somebody live in such kind of a precarious condition? Where do they get water? Think about their toilet facilities. Think about the kind of, aren't we fortunate? You think about it. This is one of the women doubly oppressed, right? The kind of, I think her name is Veronica. Think about the house that look at the house that she lives in. Is it a house at all? And look at the surroundings. It's murky. It's nasty. There are several mosquitoes. There are several diseases, that they are prone to. Look at the electricity connection. How dangerous that is. That itself is. Think about it. The kind of vulnerability that these human beings are subjected to. But why is this happening? Is a question that we need to discuss. And this is exactly what Sunil, through his documentation of the pictures or this exhibition as a series of pictures, tried to asking this question: who is responsible for this crisis? And we can just unanimously say that it is the nature. You look at it, it's because of nature's cruelty. They are all subjected to this kind of a thing. If the water level was where it was supposed to, no problem. But how is the water level rising? Think about it. You look at it. This is the surrounding that they have to live through. And this is the waters through which they have to go and come wherever they want to go and come back. They are, fisher folk. So whenever they have to go to the sea, they are in water. When they come back, they are still in waters. Think about it. And there is a story of a girl who Sunil wanted to help. Once they went to the seashore and saw their house. House in the sense it's a hut. And this girl was standing outside, and there was a bicycle parked, and the bicycle had a side view mirror. So she was looking at it and putting kajal in her eyes, kohl in her eyes. In uniform, she was going to school and all. So Sunil and his friend stopped there and talked to her and her grandmother. Then they realized that the child has nobody else but her grandmother. The sea had taken both her parents, and she was like, she wanted to study, but then there is no electricity connection there. So they thought they'll get some help and bring a solar panel and will help her to study at night and all. So when they raised the fund, they planned it all and came for the next visit. The house was not there. And these people were not seen. It's not that they were gone. They had to move to a relative's house somewhere else in the town because the house was taken by the sea. right? So we talk about dams, developments, industries coming up, several different things. And as part of that, as Vandana Shiva says, there are shadow costs. Okay, what are these shadow costs? We don't really think about it. These are the shadow costs that we have to pay. Okay, we pay people and ask them to move, or compensation whatsoever. But how can this be compensated? How can somebody's memories be compensated? How can somebody's rights be compensated? Is something that we need to really think about. And who is actually behind all these all these cruelty? Can we just blame that nature has all of a sudden become vulnerable and it has become precarious, and this is how the humans are becoming vulnerable, and then they are artists therefore? We cannot connect it linear that way. We can't have that kind of a linear connection at all. What happened is that we all are part of this destruction, and we don't really understand that. We see, I mean, it is slow violence. We don't really understand that. And are these people contributing alone to their vulnerability? They are not. Usually that is where the capitalism part comes in play. That is where the Marxist point of view or the ideology comes in play. Whatever Terry Eagleton and others have discussed comes into play. You think about it. Who is behind this kind of destruction? Who is initiating such kind of environmental destruction? It is not necessarily always these people who are directly affected by that. Okay, people who are dwelling, city dwellers who are using ACs just like me and you, several of you, we are all responsible for such kind of crisis, right? And these are all some examples of how photographs can actually generate empathy. This was a big talk in the town, and there were several articles being written, including mine. There were several interviews happening. There were several documentaries being made, reports being made sent to the government. So the power of singularity, the power of one person to photograph this, and then there are not many people in the pictures, right? He focused on one single person. That is what is called the power of singularity, as we have seen. So that person's problem, and then as a series you see several people. So you see a group of people, but you are not seeing them as a group of people, you see it as individual photographs. So you look at the artistic rendition that actually facilitates us to put the compassionate arithmetic with the grotesque reality, and then somewhere it makes us empathize with it, just like the recorded picture where the child's burial is picturized, right? So there is some transscalar imagination that we need to have. So several different people talking about this chronicle of slow violence. So Sunil has used photography. I have tried to write about it. Somebody else had documented it as a film. So several people looking at the same thing from different ways of imagination. Somebody wrote a poetry about it. Somebody wrote a story about it. So through those kind of transscalar imagination, we can give more visibility to such kind of ecological crisis. Okay, and that's one way in which we can counter pseudo inefficiency, and we can initiate empathy through bringing up several narratives of precarity. So this is one way of how we can do it through visuals. Okay, so this narrativization of precarity through several different media is very important in humanities as a discipline, because how else are we going to voice it? We cannot go to the North Pole or the South Pole and then do the experiments like how scientists would do, or we cannot go to a lab and work there and find out what could be the measures. Or so what can we do? We can think about it, write about it, give expressions to different forms of vulnerability. At the same time, be sensitive towards what we are writing. whenever we can reduce the carbon emission, the something called carbon footprint. Yeah, reduce the number of takeaways, whatsoever, small little bits. Because when we write something, it's actually endorsing, right? It's just like signing. I'm writing something, then I'm signing a kind of a contract of sincerity with what I have written, or honesty with what I have written. So I cannot go against that. I mean, this is the world would have been very nice if everybody would have been like that. But then think about it. This is generally when we sign something, we are adhering to what we have written. So when we are writing something, it is a statement. It is a part of our identity. When I talk about gender issues and equivalence and all, I cannot say that, oh, I cannot do it without asking my husband. I shouldn't be subjugated to anyone, right? I have to exercise my willpower, and then I need to write. So think about it. When we are writing, or when we are criticizing something, when we are critiquing something, when we are giving visibility to some kind of eco-precarious existence, we are actually endorsing that we will do our bit, and we won't be pseudo numbed. We won't be thinking that we are pseudo inefficient. We will act in some way or the other. So always understand that nature's precarity is always associated with human vulnerability. And when nature becomes precarious, humans are so closely related to nature. There is no existence that is deviant from the nature. Therefore, invariably, we will be affected. If the nature is precarious, owing to human actions, it is going to come back to us. And these kind of ideas are coming more and more in literature and culture. You can look at the films that are coming. There is a very interesting film called Avasa Vyuham, again in Malayalam, and it has a kind of parallel, maybe that is inspired from their um, bodies of water or something like that. My student is working in that right now. I asked her to look at it. I forgot the title of the English version, English movie. But Avasa Vyuham is the Malayalam version. So it documents how how the nature is precarious and how is it reacting back, and then how the human interventions are actually killing the nature further. So look at it, all our actions, turning on a fridge or an AC, it all affects the environment. And Sunil's response here, which I showed you through the pictures, is a singular attempt to outdo what we call as just meism, okay, and to look at the bigger picture, which is countering the anesthesia of destruction. So such literary and cultural representations of vulnerability of human and non-human will enable us to represent the humanities of crisis. This is another interesting term that Professor Nair has discussed in one of his essays, Humanities of Crisis, published in E-Social Sciences. And that phrase is very interesting. We talk about humanities in crisis because of engineering subjects and other things, but he is talking about humanities of crisis. That is like how literature and culture documents crisis, several types of crisis, and then how we can battle this idea of pseudo numbness and pseudo psychic numbness and pseudo inefficiency and all. And we need to assert that a single response does matter. Because I chose this topic today. I talk to you. This is my kind of endeavor, one of my endeavors to fight that pseudo numbness or psychic numbness, not psychic numbness, pseudo inefficiency, thinking that I cannot make a change. I feel that I can see 57 people here plus. So, whoever is hearing me, I'm not thinking that all of you are going to go for a transformation, but at least one of you might take this seriously and might go behind this thing, or might look at the references and start working on it, write about it. Writing also does matter, because you're not writing on a piece of paper and just throwing it as paper planes. You are going to publish it, people are going to read it. So the more you talk about it, the more visibility things are going to get. Right. So Jane Goodall talks about this idea of just meism, okay, something that is there. Millions of people all knowing that every moment of every day, they do make a difference. This is something that we need to do to counter just meism. We need to know that every moment we are impacting, we are influencing the earth, we are making some kind of difference to the earth we are living in. So that is countering the Jasminism. Oh, me alone, no, I am not doing anything bad. What if I litter here? Or what if I burn plastic? You know, it's not going to make the ozone hole bigger. Yeah, we can say that. But then that is not countering Jasminism. We say that at least I am not doing it to destroy the ozone layer. Let it be. That damage is less. And when you are doing a good thing, yeah, I'm not using plastic. Instead of carrying plastic bags every single time, I'm using a cloth bag instead. You are making a change there. So there are several ways in which you can counter this Jasminism idea. And focusing on the power of singularity is a methodology, I would say, to actively respond to the crisis and the precarious positions that the earth as a whole and humans as a part of it need to go through invariably. Yeah. So participating in the destruction indirectly is what Sunil had done, is what I have done through writing and through talking to you people. So it's just like how Dante begins his Inferno. Through me is the way to join the lost people, right? So if you look at it that way, it's very interesting. We can connect at some point where we are actually participating in the destruction indirectly. Yeah, we are joining the victims when we empathize with them. That is the argument. And I'll end with this Edward Everett Hale's quote, where he talks about, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights. Your expertise has added significant depth to our understanding on researching ecological vulnerability. Is there any questions for the participants?
Can you repeat the books' names? Which were the books? Numbers and Nerves? Is it? I mean, this is one. Nerves and Numbers, the Numbers and Nerves. I need to check. You check the site, you will get, yeah, it's Numbers and Nerves. I'll just type it here. Do you face any difficulty while doing this kind of research? That's a direct message. Oh, so it went to Gayatri alone. 1 second, Gayatri. I'll just type this down. Yeah, I hope everybody got this. Numbers and Nerves, emotion. Yeah. So Gayatri, do you face any difficulty while doing this kind of research? Not as of now, because I didn't go to that particular area to show and all. I don't know what kind of difficulty you mean. For me, because I read and I had a clear kind of framework being emerging from whatever books that I have read. It wasn't difficult, but then any research is difficult, right, to some extent. So yes, that kind of, not any physical kind of difficulty I face, because I didn't go into the water and all. So that